Spinning wheel. Good afternoon. Welcome to an episode of the How Change Changes You podcast. I am super excited to be welcoming Susan Laurie onto this week's episode, where Susan will be sharing her specific change story. As ever, these conversations are all about inspiring us to look at handling change in a different way. Naturally, change is a constant part of life. We are constantly changing in every way, which shape and form that we are. But the real tools of being able to increase our own well-being, be that mentally, emotionally, and physically, is to look at the opportunities that change presents to us. We'll cover that in Susan's story today. But before we go any further, I shall hand it over to Susan. Would you like to introduce yourself, Susan, and let people know who you are, what you do, and where you're coming in from?
I'm Susan Laurie, and I'm coming in from, I'm down in southwest London, but I'm from County Durham originally, from a town called Consett in County Durham. And a bit about me, I'm just a very ordinary person. I went to university up in the northeast, got a job, had a nice career in pharmaceutical industry, in marketing, and I also set up a business when I was up in the northeast as well. Just a ordinary person, wanting to make the best of myself and do work hard and do well, but I lost everything to alcohol, which worked by stealth over the years. Just an ordinary student enjoying to let my hair down with a drink with my mates. Then becoming in the workforce in the pharmaceutical industry, enjoying a drink with my colleagues to unwind, to network as well, because there was a big drinking culture. Just really ordinary, doing the things that people do. But over the years, like very stealth-like, alcohol crept further and further into my life and became a more important part of my life until it completely took over and my life completely fell apart.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Susan. I know we chatted just before we came on live just how important it is to talk about these things, and we'll go on to share a lot of the work that you're doing to normalize and talk about the fact that addictions, be it alcoholism, be it any kind of addiction, we're all addicted to something. But your specific journey with dealing with alcoholism, I think, like you just said, right, we're normal people, this is just what you do. And certainly exactly what you shared, for me as a student when I was younger, I would think nothing of a whole weekend fueled by alcohol and party scene. And it's still today associated with relaxing and partying, and and all of that's well and good until it actually starts affecting and controlling kind of your life. So this, obviously, for those who are listening, is the main story that Susan's going to share, is kind of her journey, but actually what she's doing now to share this information. You'll notice along the bottom of the screen there, Susan wrote a book called From Rock Bottom to Sober Forever. So that's another thing that we will be talking about. But before we get into all of that, Susan, would you like to just take us back to at the time when things started to change, where you started to realize what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of years ago. I'm going back to the 90s when I first graduated and had my first job. And exactly like you said, it's alcohol. It's still the case as well. It's such a massive part of our culture that it's what people use to unwind and to have fun. And that's what I used to do. But it was also in those days, and it still is in some companies as well, it can be a big part of, fitting in. I know if I hold my hand up and I'm really honest, I used it probably for confidence then as well, because with my background, and I was working with all these, that I perceived as really confident, really successful people. I was, having to present and talk to doctors and consultants and stuff as well. But my colleagues, I thought, wow, they're so confident and successful. I think I used alcohol in the beginning to be more confident when I was with people. But then over time, and the way it works with alcohol, which I absolutely had no idea about, is because of the impact it sort of has on you. It can make you feel a bit anxious. And I think anyone who's ever had even the slightest hangover, that little knock that you get. And over time, that can sort of get a bit worse. The more that we drink, the more that alcohol is part of our lives. And I didn't realize it was the alcohol causing that, the alcohol leaving my system. And I thought there was something wrong with my life that was making me anxious. So then I would drink to take away the anxiety that I was feeling. And I think that's another aspect of alcohol that people often don't talk about, that as well as using it to have fun and have a great time with friends, people do use it to cope with stress and anxiety and stuff like that, which there's a lot of that about now. So that I was sort of thinking, oh, what's wrong with my life? I'm always feeling anxious, drinking on that. So even, years back, it was creeping into my life. And the thing, Christina, about alcohol and becoming, more dependent on alcohol is that it does work. It's very stealth-like, that it can take years and you don't realize that you've got a problem. The people close to you sort of get used to you loving a drink and being a drunk person and being wanting to be larger than life at parties. So it took a long time for me to realize, actually, I think this is starting to cause problems now. The sad thing is, for a lot of people, once you start to realize that is where the battle begins. It's for some people, it's not as easy as you think to, just address it and go back to normal drinking. So yeah, in the beginning, very much for fun. And it's the same today. I often talk about, you in the work I do, you look on social media and people talk about, it's wine o'clock, it's gin o'clock, it's 5 p.m. somewhere. All of this, let's start drinking because it's part of unwinding and, letting our hair down and things like that. So things haven't really changed a lot since then.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, thank you for sharing that, Susan, because I know as well, we talked about, the beginnings of actually how it can happen. And I'm sure anyone who's listening can resonate with what you're sharing. And I think, for most people, we naturally normalize kind of, patterns of behavior, don't we? Where it's like, oh, well, that's just something that I do. And so a lot of the time we don't question it until then something starts to force you to question it.
You're so right. And I think as well as that, whatever we do in life, not just alcohol, but you tend to associate with people who behave in the same way. It's like that echo chamber. Yeah. So if you're surrounding yourself and gravitating towards people who like a drink, that normalizes it. And you think, well, everyone drinks like this, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So that is one thing, I've learned, and we'll probably go on to that I always say to people, never compare yourself to other people's drinking. But yeah, we do normalize it by surrounding ourselves with like-minded people as well, which then makes it even longer before you realize you've got a problem as well.
Exactly. And by the sounds of it, you said yourself that by that point, that's when the real battle begins, because it's almost got its claws into you in the fact that it's that addictive substance where you're in that need, you're in that cycle, that vicious cycle of especially if you're drinking to relax or maybe to overcome anxiety, then actually what you're doing is feeding it ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely feeding it. And you've hit the nail on the head there. A lot of people don't factor in and don't even think about it as a substance. it's addictive. Your body starts to crave it. Your body can become dependent on it, even, way back for me. So you factor that in, that it's an addictive substance, but also that you do get into that cycle. You get into that cycle, whatever reason you drink for. Something else I wasn't aware of then is your body develops tolerance. So whether you're drinking to have a laugh with your mates or to cope or, unwind, over time, to have exactly the same impact on you, exactly the same laugh with your mates, you need more alcohol because it's developed tolerance, because our body is amazing. It just adapts. So you're needing more. So then the consequences of things like feeling anxious with hangovers, they get worse. Then you maybe drink a bit more. And then over time, add into that, then it might start causing a few arguments. So that makes you feel a bit low and a bit rubbish about yourself. So you might drink on that. And then this cycle just becomes a bit more.
You can see it, can't you, in terms of it's compounding effects.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, and I can well imagine, I often use the analogy, when you're sat inside the jar, you can't read the label because you're so in it. And as well, if you are surrounded by people doing the same things, and you've normalized it for so long, it's like, well, no, this is who I am. This is what I do. And so you don't question it.
Yeah.
For you, when did that start to tip into the awareness and then doing something about it?
I mean, a long time ago, and I'm talking before I was, getting help, I had niggling worries that I ignored. And my son, who is 28 now, when he was a little boy and he'd see me going to pour a glass of wine, I can remember clearly. I mean, it still makes me emotional. He said, "Mummy, I like it when you drink tea," because he picked up on it changing personality.
Yeah.
I thought, obviously, as you do, that it made me a really fun mum.
Yeah.
But kids are scared by it. And I remember him saying that, but, I ignored it. So I had niggling worries. But then, and even back then, good friends who love me, and people who care about me would say, "Oh, you know what? It gets to a stage in the night where you just sort of, have a bit, maybe, if you stop at that level, because then it's sort of not becoming, it comes a bit unfun then." So that goes on for a while. And like I say, now that I know about alcohol and alcohol dependence, there are all these stages, like loving a drink to heavy drinking to problem drinking to functioning. So all of these stages can last quite a few years. But as you said before, once it gets its claws in, once I became sort of, went from, say, heavy drinking to it becoming a problem, that was still a long time ago. Causing arguments, causing problems, maybe, being hungover at work, things like that, not being on the ball. So when it was a problem, so in the early days, you might think, right, I think I needed to knock this on the head a bit and try and, cut down. Maybe just drink on weekends when I'd been drinking on an evening, and then it's so. I mean, I have always imagined alcohol, and now that I look back, as being like an evil entity that got its claws into me and just didn't want to let me go. So everything, I'd cut down for a while, and then it would convince me, yeah, you've got this. It's not a problem. You can start drinking again, or you overreacted. People are overreacting. See, look, I haven't had a drink for a couple of weeks.
I can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. But then and it always progresses. If you don't, dependence progresses. So when it started to be more of a problem, in terms of, causing real arguments and issues, I went to the GP, as people do. It's sort of the first port of call, because I didn't want, I thought, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not going to Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe I need some counselling, because obviously I'm anxious all the time, not realizing it was the alcohol. So I'd go to my GP, go for counselling. I had all sorts of things, acupuncture, over the years. So, and these are like long periods of time and thinking, yeah, I'm fine. I was using it as a coping mechanism. I've dealt with it. But then as things progress, then, then it's like, yeah, I've got a problem. So I know I'm sort of waffling on, but it takes years.
No, well, you're painting a picture, I think, Susan, beautifully, of like it happens in waves. I think people generally think, oh, well, it starts here and then it's like up like an escalator. But what I'm hearing from your description is that you go through maybe weeks or months of like, oh no, I've got this. And then other times
we all overreacted. Calm down, everyone. Yeah. And I think sometimes when, I'm talking, say, if I've maybe talking to somebody about their drinking, I'm not a counselor or anything, but sometimes people come to me for help, or sometimes people use me as almost to compare themselves to and think, well, I'm not drinking in the morning like you were. And I always say, I didn't start there. I didn't get there overnight. It took a long time of progression. And then believe me, Christina, once, you had been at the GP, had done counselling, and it's, moved on, causing more problems. When it had its claws in me, then it was a battle for my life over years. I can't stress that enough. It was absolutely horrible, really scary, the power it has.
No, I think it's important just to kind of highlight exactly what you've just said there, that you didn't start there. You didn't start at like drinking in the morning. It shows the progression, but again, that it's like a low lying under the radar thing. So it kind of, and then depending on, and you shared this before as well, of I think when you're out in the world functioning, it's kind of like, well, I made the meeting, I did that, and I'm using it as a coping mechanism, or I'm using it to like chill at the end of an evening, or I need it to wind down, because I think I've associated that definitely of like, I'm going to treat myself. But it's when that treat becomes a constant to lean on, that really is a bit of a warning signal, right?
Definitely. But that's what happens. You think, look, I can have, maybe half a bottle of wine a night and go to meetings, and then maybe a bottle of wine a night, and then it increased. And look, I can do this. I'm functioning. I'm going to meetings. I'm running a home. I'm probably not very well, but outwardly, and I would, feel ashamed, but I would make people, the close people, brave people who would maybe bring it up with me, I would make them feel guilty about even suggesting that I have an alcohol problem, because of that reason. Like, look, I'm doing all this. I need a drink to unwind. Who doesn't? But I'm still doing stuff. But like I say, there's no permanent plateau with each of these stages, and then you go from functioning to just not functioning at all, and that's what happened.
Yeah. In those early kind of stages, or over that expansive time, if somebody's listening to this and kind of thinking, oh, that might be me, what would you tell people? What would you tell your younger self? Like,
yeah, I would first of all be completely honest. Like I say, it's easy to be in an echo chamber. It's so easy to compare yourself to other people. And what surprises a lot of people when I'm talking to them to help to say this is what happened to me, I always say, years ago I might have drank less than some of my colleagues, but it was me that had the unhealthy relationship with alcohol. So we need to ask ourselves more soul-searching questions about our relationship with it and why we're drinking it, rather than just thinking, well, the guidelines say this and I'm only drinking that. And I always say, never ever compare yourself to somebody else's drinking. Compare yourself to yourself 6 months ago or a year ago. Am I drinking more than I was 6 months ago, a year ago? And ask yourself about the reasons. that you're drinking. Like if you associate it with everything, I would make sure alcohol was there at a kid's birthday party for the parents. I associated alcohol with everything. It was always included. Or if I haven't drank for a while, am I really patting myself on the back? That was me, like, oh, no, great. Whereas that should be normal behavior.
Yeah.
So it's being honest with yourself about your relationship with alcohol, which a lot of people aren't. They compare themselves to other people, or they look at how many units they're drinking, whereas you've got to think about why you're doing it as well, and the emotions.
It's understandable, isn't it? Because I think anyone who's listening, and I'm sure, like for any of us, right, there is an element of shame here, because at a deeper level, we're kind of thinking, deep down, I know this is wrong, but I can't stop doing it. And I think this is where being radically honest with yourself just take an incredible amount of courage. And I think, one thing to highlight here is that shame only survives in the dark. It only survives if we don't share and we don't tell, hence why we're having this conversation as well, and why it's so important, because I've certainly got friends and colleagues and people in my life that alcohol has been a problem. And seeing people suffering, but knowing that, God, if I'd have stepped in, if I'd have maybe made some kind of difference, could we have stopped that from happening? And I think that's why we need to be talking about it, to say, look, there's no shame in struggling with it, but the real courage is just to kind of go, do you know what, this is causing me a problem, and trying to get some support, because support's out there, isn't it?
The support is out there, but what you've just said, that I think that's the crux of it. There's something about alcohol. There's still so much stigma around, no matter, even though there's a lot of more people talking about it now, which is brilliant. But I think it's because it's part of our culture. It's acceptable. A lot of people drink it and don't have a problem. So if you have a problem with it, there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of stereotypes about the sort of people who have an alcohol problem. And the thing about it as well is that in this way that it does, it convinces you that you're okay, even when you have the niggling worries or somebody mentions it. It convinces you that you're all right and everything's okay. But these days, you're absolutely right. There's so much more help out there that's available, and the important thing is talking about it, because it does, like you said, shame and the dark and alcohol absolutely thrives on secrecy and shame and embarrassment, and it thrives in that way. And that's why people, like me years ago, I was sort of reluctant to, especially, when I was working, but reluctant to keep going to the GP, because there's so much fear, even around, being reported to social services, because I was a parent.
Right.
There's so much fear and shame around it that people are scared to get help. And that's one thing about having a problem with it. It's a very scary place to be, and it can feel very lonely. Because of that fear, because of the shame, so people do keep it to themselves. But there's a lot of...
sorry to interrupt you. It totally makes sense, right? Because then we're in this place of avoidance, and we then rationalize, and we just keep avoiding. But then you must then have this low level anxiety from the avoidance, right? That you just
got that.
It's not right.
You've got that going on. But then the really important thing as well is you've got an addictive substance that you are craving. And people often forget, to sort of take that out of the equation. But no, it's an addictive substance. It makes people addicted to it. So you add in that to all of these feelings and anxieties and stuff, but your body's physically starting to crave something as well. And it becomes this really scary combination of stuff that becomes such, like I say, a battle for your life.
So I know that Susan, you've mentioned before, and you said there when we talk about help that's out there, and I know you've tried multiple ways, like when this battle started to take hold, where did you go? Like, what was your experience of this battle? And I know obviously penultimately what did the trick, like what made it work. And I think this is obviously leading on to now why you passionately share what you share, about how this is all handled and how people can access support and get what works for them.
Yeah, I over the years, like I say, it doesn't happen overnight. And over the years, I tried everything that anyone listening or anyone, you know, who thinks about what would I do if I had a problem with alcohol, all of the things that you would expect somebody to try and do, I did in probably the logical order that people would do it. So go to the GP, think, yeah, I've got anxiety and this and that. That's why I'm drinking, having counselling. And then, you know, it progressed after it convinced me I didn't have a problem. So then as things got more serious, went to Alcoholics Anonymous and went to lots of meetings, lots of different meetings, had different sponsors, you know, working the steps, and ultimately failing, but then trying again. And that went on for a long time, you know, really putting my heart and soul in it. And remember being in Durham Cathedral, working one of the steps with my sponsor, crying, you know, like begging to get over it, to for the strength to. So that was, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous. Then at the same time, through the NHS, there was something called Smart Therapy, which I did. So, you know, throwing myself into that and then thinking, yeah, I've got this, relapsing, until ultimately, you know, as you would imagine, I was in rehab. One of the rehabs I took myself to. So I said, I'm desperate. I need to do this. But then another one, I was almost dragged kicking and screaming, didn't want to go.
Right.
So over the years, I tried all of those things. And yeah, I assumed that, you know, I didn't assume it was easy to beat, but I thought by, especially Alcoholics Anonymous, because the mantra is, if you work it, it works.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work, well, you blame yourself for a start, thinking I mustn't have worked it properly, but you become so scared, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? It is so scary as time goes on, and you think, that hasn't worked. I'm running out of options. And I think I didn't realize then, you know, you sort of have all these ideas in your head, what will help somebody with an alcohol addiction. But I didn't realize that there are other things that work. I think people have it in their head, you know, if Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't, you know, that is the thing that works for everyone. But when it doesn't, you're so scared. But there are other things out there.
Yeah, no, I'm sure, because like you say, I guess from the conversations that I had, and that seemed like, oh, well, that's the next step. That's the, you know, and then once you go through that, it's fine. People don't talk about the fact that you come in and off of it, right? It's actually, yes, there's steps to work, and it does work for a lot of people. But what about for those people that it doesn't work? And I think it's not one size fits all, is it? It's not like, you know, a wonder for every single person. It's there. It's like anything, I guess, be it for any medicine or any modality. Yes, we're all similar, but we're all actually different. So
we're all different. And I think one of the problems is as well that because, you know, and it's no fault of anyone, people don't know a lot about alcohol addiction. You know, for most people, it's not part of their lives and stuff. And it's the same for my family, for my friends. So all you know is what you hear, and you think, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous will sort somebody out. I know my husband did, my son did. And then when it doesn't, there's that enormous shame, and you've let people down. So there's all of this on top, and I'm not making excuses, but that then, you know, can make you drink to just because you've let everyone down and you feel like a failure, and you've run out of options. So and alcohol's there saying, well, I'll take that feeling of shame and regret and letting people down, I'll take that away.
Because it's respite, I guess, in a way. That's what it tells you. It tricks you into thinking that I can make you feel better, even if it's just momentarily.
Yeah. And then on top of that, further down the line, and this is what was really scary, when you're physically dependent, in the end, I couldn't give up drinking because of the withdrawals I would have.
Yeah.
And I had this, when one of the rehabs I was in, there was this statistic that they just used to talk about, and it was just, so commonplace, and the only 3 out of 10 of you is going to survive this. And it was probably to scare us, and it worked. But over time, that was in my head all the time. The chances of me beating this now that I've tried everything are so slim. So low. And it is true. Not when you get to the depths of dependence that I did in the end, which was horrible. Not many people do survive that.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, because that's when its claws can kind of almost take it in deeper, because it's the shame of then, well, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. There's something inherently wrong with you, I can imagine. That then it just takes you deeper and deeper down into it.
The physical side of it, because by then, if I stopped drinking, I had the most horrific hallucinations. It's dangerous to stop drinking, but really real hallucinations. I was so ill, and the little anxiety you get with a normal hangover, that if you multiply that by 1,000, it's like impending doom. And I just wanted to crawl out my own skin, and so I had to avoid withdrawal by drinking as well.
Yeah,
it's the fact there was no way I could sober up then and face the carnage I'd caused in people's lives.
Of course. So thank you so much for sharing this, Susan, because I think it's just so important that, and it's so amazing that you're in a place where, because what we shared with this is that to give hope and inspiration of like, look, actually, you're still here and you've managed to get some help. So what was the point that actually, or the treatment that you found that made the difference for you?
Yeah. So at that stage, I was on my own. So I'd sort of progressed from that, functioning to not functioning, to then everything just falling apart. And even being brought home by the police, starting fights, drink driving, all sorts, being brought home by the police a few times, or the police knocking on the door, waking up in hospital on a drip, not knowing how I'd got there. Even sort of that wasn't as bad as it got. Ultimately, I was 24/7 drinking, just to if I sort of came around, I would drink myself into oblivion again, so I didn't have to face anything. So I was really ill, and incontinent, just horrible, just a horrible life, just a mess. So, and there was this day, and I don't know where it came from, but because I'd done Google searches so many times over the years to find different people to help me, because that's something else people, don't realize, that when you've got a problem with alcohol, especially if you're a parent, you don't want to keep going back to the doctor or keep going down the official channels, because you're on the radar. And I was worried, about social services and stuff like that. So there's loads of people online who'll say, who'll take your money and say they can help you. And I'd had about 5 lots of hypnotherapy over the years, really some dangerous treatments, paid £1,000 to have electricity put through my body and caught in a crystal, mad stuff that didn't work. And then you drink on the guilt of wasting all the money. But so I'd done all those Google searches over the years, and I don't know what brought me to do another one. And I didn't even write a proper email to this guy that I found online. And there was something about his smiley face on his website. His website, wasn't all that or anything, but he had alcohol, and his list of things like PTSD. He dealt with bulimia, anorexia, but alcohol was on there. And I just wrote him this email saying that I've tried loads of hypnotherapy, because his is related to that, but not, it's much more than that. And I just said, I don't want to die. I said, it hasn't worked, and I don't want to die though. And he sent me back the most amazing email. That, it still makes me fill up to think about it, how kind he was when I couldn't even be bothered to write a proper email. And that was, well, it's over 9.5 years now since I went to see him, and I spent one day with him. I had to sober up. I had to go through, withdrawal and everything, and sober up before I went to do it. So I stayed at one of my sisters, so I was safe and I couldn't drink and stuff. And I spent one day with him, and I haven't had a drink since. And yeah, I don't have to go to meetings or anything. He's just totally rewired my brain in a way that is like it is like a miracle. And I'm just lucky I met him.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm not surprised emotion comes up because of all of the battle that you've shared, and I'm sure you've just kind of scratched the surface. There's probably so much more, but to be able to kind of, you wonder, don't you, of, that last bit of hope, that something that's just made you kind of connect the dots and kind of go, I'm going to try this person. And the fact that as well, he replied to you with such a kind, open way, I'm sure made a difference as well.
Totally. And his technique, because to me, ultimately, like I've said, at the bottom of all this, there's a raging addiction, which is, being caught, has come about for some reason. But I just think with alcohol, with alcohol addiction, you need something that takes that away first off. I'm all for, counselling and stuff for months and months, or however long it takes afterwards. But if you don't take that alcohol away, people are craving it in between. And he just dealt with everything in that one day in a very, in a fantastic, miraculous way. And he's such a modest, unassuming guy, but based in the Northeast. But so I've spent my time since then trying to get his, because I know how hard this is to beat, trying to get the NHS to look at what Tim does. And so, but ultimately, it's not all about one treatment, because like you were saying, different things work for different people. So that's the important message. Just, don't give up trying to find your thing.
Yeah, it's so funny. Just as you said that burst of sunshine came through your blinds, I was like, ah. And that's why we're having this conversation, right? Is not to say that there, I guess to highlight that there is hope, there is
this hope
out there, and that people don't have to suffer. And I think, there's so much suffering that actually there's people there to reach out to connect to, and it's finding your way, or a way that resonates the most. But really, just, I guess it starts with that being a bit honest, and then kind of going on the journey of like, actually, what's this life for but to live, but to be here.
And I massively believe that in all of us, no matter how hopeless things sometimes seem, there's that little spark that is never put out. That, no matter how much you think it's been squashed down and extinguished, it's there to, and that's what drove me on to, like you say, there are things out. We're all different people. We all respond to different things. you know, if somebody says this is the way, if this doesn't work, you know, that this is the only way that works, that's wrong. There are so many different things for not just addiction, for everything in life.
Yeah, to never give up. To never,
Always,
never ever give up.
I say never ever give up. There's always hope, no matter how hopeless it seems. And it might not seem like that, but I think we've all got that little bit of strength within us.
Yeah. That inner resilience, that almost, it's that life force energy that just
Yes.
will not be put out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And those that do, that's, you know, that's the way of the world, I guess. But just to know that actually, yeah, hence why we're having this conversation, to be able to kind of remind people of this. So obviously, once you kind of, I mean, I'm curious actually now, as I was going to ask you another question, but I'm curious. So when you realised that, after the work that Tim did, and we'll make sure that we put the links and everything below, so if people want to find out more, they can. I can't imagine, like, you then kind of going, oh, like, what was your reaction then, days, weeks after the treatment that you had?
That's the thing. Because my husband, my son had heard this all before. My sisters, my friend, you know, heard it all before. Oh, I've found this great treatment, you know. So I knew, and I didn't want to push anyone to be back part, and you know, like, oh, this is what, and I didn't know. Only time,
Yeah,
I knew only time would tell. So I knew I had to be gentle with them, just leave them, because they'd been through so much, and just so it wasn't like going into a cocoon, but it almost felt like there was nothing I could do to prove it. So let time be the, you know, the one that told the truth. And the thing about alcohol and addiction as well, that if you're addicted to anything, whether it be alcohol, food, anything, it consumes you. Whether even the times when I wasn't drinking, I'd be thinking, oh, I haven't had a drink for 3 days. Isn't that great? You're always thinking about it. It's always in your head, or when's my next drink, or where have I hidden that drink? Have I got enough hidden? So alcohol took up so much of my headspace. What I noticed was that it was almost like this massive void that, where I wasn't thinking about alcohol. And that's how I first started to think. I thought, God, I haven't had thought about alcohol. And that was when I started to realize maybe this has worked. But as well as that, it's a really weird place to be, because I'd spent so much energy on alcohol for years. Mm-hmm. I had this massive gap to fill. So I think, yeah, it took a long time for me to realize, or to even trust, my God, this has worked. And it was more because I wasn't thinking about alcohol, or I wasn't counting, oh, it's so many weeks since I've had a drink, or it's so many months. Even now, I know it's important to some people to know exactly the date, or how many thousand days it is. But for me, I know it was March, 9 years ago, 2015. But apart from that, you know, a bit vague. I don't count the days, but it was over time when I realized. And then the first thing you have to do is, or the important thing was, try and repair the damage I'd done to relationship. That was the most important thing to me, my son. So then a few years down the line, when that, you know, that was, you know, back on track, and they trusted me that I was sober, it was then that I thought, I am so lucky. I have to, you know, I almost felt it was like a duty to help people, because I know how scary it is and how hard it is. Yeah. And that was why I decided to write the book. But also, you know, it's about giving hope to people, and never giving up. But in a way that what people find surprising about me is, in spite of everything, you know, it's not in an anti-alcohol way, like alcohol is a poison or it destroys lives. Because one of the beauties of what's rewiring my brain is that nobody around me has had to change their lives. And, you know, some people do like a drink and enjoy it. And in the past, when I was, you know, say, come out of rehab, or I was doing AA or whatever, excuse me, I wouldn't be able to have alcohol in the house. People wouldn't be able to drink around me. But that it's the fact that, you know, nobody has to change their lives. I understand that, you know, if people can drink mindfully and enjoy it, and I mean, I'm from the Northeast, and my family like a drink. A lot of my friends do. So it was more just give hope to people who are worried they've got a bit of a problem, to help prevent them becoming like what I became, but also, you know, for the people who have gone that bit further and are really struggling, just to give them hope and, you know, help them. I just felt like it was almost a duty because I had survived.
Yeah, wow. I know, I got goosebumps there, totally, Susan. I think, you know, for anyone who's listening or is, you know, watching this back on replay, just to kind of know that, you know, and I can feel the gratitude from you. I think when you've been to the, like, you know, the rock bottom, the darkest of the dark places, when you've actually been able to kind of see the light again, I mean, it's transformational. And then it's almost in your very being that you want to kind of give back and help people, like, you know, through their journey if you can. Yeah. So, and amazing that you've taken the time to write a book, because I'm sure that wasn't an easy process, was it?
It wasn't. I got people's blessing beforehand, my son and my husband, but yeah, I mean, I'd never written a book before, and it was, there's some I thought, if I'm going to do it, I've got to be totally honest in it. So a lot of it was quite painful, and it took me a long time to write it, over a year. But yeah, it was to give people hope, and just, you know, nothing. There's always that little flicker of strength, and, you know, that you can ignite, and
to remind people that you're there.
Yeah.
Something that I know you've developed as well, because you've like taken this to the House of Lords and been quite an activist around this kind of topic, around helping people and implementing these things. Do you want to tell people about, is it Sober Code that you created a little bit?
Code. Yeah. I was lucky in that it was because of my book, and because somebody, Ian Gilmore, read it, who's, you know, up there in our country, an alcohol expert. He was a liver consultant, and he recommended it to people who were on the House of Lords Commission on Alcohol Harm to read, because he said it gives you an understanding of the progression. So I was invited to give evidence there about the harm, you know, not just physical harm, but the harm that alcohol does. But so because I've got that sort of platform, one thing that is important to me is, you know, people who have got alcohol dependence, it's such a scary place to be. It can be so lonely, but you're so desperate as well that it can make you very, very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I know it did me. Like I said, these searches on Google to find help, because you might not want to keep going to your GP. And there's a lot of people, you know, out there, you know, who you know, anyone, like a personal trainer, you pay to help you go to the gym. And I think it's brilliant, you know, to help people cut down on their drinking if it's a lifestyle choice and somebody wants to do it to be healthy. But once somebody's dependent, you need, you know, that needs specialist treatment. Mm-hmm. So I set up Sober Code, which is like, it's a voluntary code of ethics for sober coaches, just to say, you know, in as part of when they're first speaking to somebody, when they're exploring whether they, you know, can work with that person, just to ensure that they're not working with people who are alcohol dependent. Fair enough, somebody who wants to cut down and be healthy and maybe sober curious, as people call it, but just a voluntary code of ethics. They don't have to read it or stick to it. But I just thought, because it's not regulated, why not have it out there? Because some people don't think how vulnerable people are.
Yeah, especially when you're in a vulnerable place and you need help. I think then, you know, sadly, there are people out there that will prey on the vulnerable and take people's money when they know deep down that actually they're not qualified. And, you know, they think maybe they have the best intentions, and even those that don't, you've got to
Exactly.
be careful. And so, yeah, it's another dimension of the whole situation to think about. So to all like wrap this up as well, Susan, when you kind of then look back over like the journey that you've been on, what have you really learned about Susan? What have you kind of gathered about who you are?
I've realized I've got a strength and a resilience that I didn't know I had. And that I've realized that I've got, this, I don't know what you would call it, but a sense of I've been so lucky and I'm so grateful. So I should use that to help other people rather than just get on with my life. So I'm proud of that. But as well as that, just how important, the people who care about us in our life are, our family, our good friends, and that, that we waste a lot of time and energy on chasing maybe things or people that, don't care. And in the grand scheme of things, would they be there for us? And I've realized how important what I call, and you might call it the 2 o'clock in the morning people are that you can phone and you can rely on, and just treasure them. They're precious. It's so important. I've realized that life's too short to waste energy on chasing lots and lots of friendships and people and things. Just focus on the precious ones.
Yeah, it's almost like a kind of, I don't know, exclusion diet almost. If it brings everything into sharp focus, where then suddenly everything's contrasted of like, actually, and I, as an energy leadership coach, I talk about kind of how much energy, how much capacity you have. Because I coach a lot of women, a lot of leaders that are maybe givers, but they'll give from a place of kind of, yes, of love, but also of validation, but then to the point where they deplete themselves.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to kind of, again, have that radical, honest conversation with yourself of like, have I got the capacity to give? And actually, where is this giving coming from? And being able to kind of create a virtuous cycle versus a vicious cycle, where you're actually fueling by giving, you're fueling yourself. So you're not depleting, it's filling you up by giving.
Yeah.
So then it kind of creates this abundant, beautiful effect, which it sounds like that's what you're now doing, Susan, with the work that you're doing. Do you now work for an alcohol charity? Is that right?
Charity, yeah. And it's all about, in a non-anti-alcohol way, prevention, harm, just making people more mindful about
more aware.
Yeah.
Part of it is education, isn't it? To your point, I think there's so much information we're bombarded with, and sometimes you're kind of thinking, well, what's the truth anymore? I'm not sure. Like, where do you go?
Exactly, and taking away that stigma, which there's a way to go with that, but hopefully, things like this, giving people just the confidence and the courage to talk about it.
Yeah, no, well, thank you again, Susan, for just sharing your story so beautifully, so from a heartfelt space. And anyone who's watching this live or replay, please know that you're not alone. Please know that there's always something else to try. There's people out there that can help you. It's having that openness and curiosity to kind of go, wanting to try things. We'll make sure that all of Susan's links to our book, website, and other resources are available, because this is part of change, right? I guess a closing question, Susan, would be, how is this added resilience and realizing that you're capable of so much more than you ever thought possible, how is this influencing like your future, how you view life now?
Yeah, well, I'm working in a field that I would never, and doing things that I never would have imagined that I would do. But yeah, it has changed my view on things. I was a real people pleaser, and that doesn't mean to say I'm a horrible, selfish person who only puts myself first now, but it's made me realize what's important in life and how, like you say, we can deplete ourselves and we can also damage our mental health and stuff by trying to do too much for too many people, and we should focus on ourselves and what's important.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, thank you so much again. You stay where you are. Thank you, everybody else, for joining live or watching replay. We'd love to know your comments. And if any of this has resonated, maybe you know somebody who's struggling and you can put this in front of them, then do share this. This is a free podcast. We do this just out the goodness of our hearts to really help people make changes for the better. Because when we look after ourselves, we can look after each other. That's what it's all about. So catch you next week on next week's Tuesday Live and How Change Changes You podcast.